Her experience with bullying began at just 4 years old. Today, we're talking about how those experiences can follow us into adulthood. We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is emotional mastery coach Ellie. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Tim. It's such a pleasure to be on your show.
So, Ellie, you experienced bullying at 4 years old. Tell me about that.
Yes. The question I get all the time is, how do you know it was at 4 years old that you first experienced bullying? Because that is a really kind of precise age, right? Well, I'll tell you how I know. Because when I wasn't even 4 years old, my mom left my dad. She separated basically because my dad was a raging alcoholic. He was always in and out of work, good for nothing really. She was doing all the hard work and she was looking after me, and it basically was not adding anything to my life. And so she decided to leave him when I wasn't even 4.
Okay.
And for my fourth birthday, I got a phone call from him saying happy birthday. I didn't even recognize his voice. That tells you what kind of little presence he had in my life. But then after that, I never heard from him ever again. So I was raised by a single mother, very strong woman. Obviously, she had to wear the father hat and the mother hat. She was working full time in a hospital. And ever since I got that call, my mom said to me, I just want you to know that it's a good thing that you're not with your dad anymore. That it's just myself, you, and my mother, AKA my grandmother, because your father was not just an alcoholic, but he was a belligerent alcoholic. He would always pick a fight, right? He would always find a way to have a row with someone. And sometimes he'll come to blows as well when he wouldn't get it his way, to the point that he will get fired from work all the time. Sometimes he actually had physical fights with his line manager, right? And so you know what children are like when they're, children. They throw a tantrum. They stomp their feet, on the floor. And sometimes they're raging for no reason. And the one thing I remember ever since being 4 years old is being told by my mother, my grandmother, and everyone else in our family, don't be like your father. Your father was not good. Your father had no friends. Your father was always looking down at everyone, and your father was really emotionally and verbally abusive to everybody. So don't throw those tantrums because you'll end up being just like your father. That's the one thing that was said to me ever since I was old enough to be told about why my mother had left my father. So that was in preschool years that I was
Okay.
going to preschool. That's the first time I experienced bullying. Because about, what is it now, 2026? In 2012 is when I started my emotional release work because I became really sick. So from then on, I really wanted to know what it was, all the emotional baggage that I had accumulated over the previous decades. And that's when I started retracing, slowly but steadily, all of the key milestones in my life, the key moments that had shaped my life and that made me who I was. And so eventually I started looking at my 30s and my 20s and my teenage years, all the way through to that particular time. Because I know now that after having had those multiple conversations with my mom and grandma as a way to placate me, as a way of sedate me when I was having these moments when children are just, they're naughty, they're spoiled. And we're allowed to be like this. All children are, right? As long as they're told there's a way. But because of what I was told, it was very important for me not to show any sign of anger, any fit of rage, or any emotions that could be perceived as negative by those around me. And so naturally, when children in preschool, because I only went one year in preschool, then the next year I went straight to primary school. So when children started taunting me and being a little bit, verbally active towards me, like, oh, we don't like you, get away. I'll just shut up. I would not say anything back. And then he went on. He went on in school. And every time someone would do something to me or say something to me, again, I'll be there silent, quiet, taking it all in. Now you can imagine what that does to a child. And at that point, check this out. That point when I was already in primary school, age 7, 8, 9, because this went on, right? This went on through to my teenage years and the corporate world. I never realized that it was all shaped by that conversation that I had with my mom when I was 4 years old. But I just knew that it was important to separate strong emotions from myself. And so I lost that identity. And I know many people that are being bullied, they have lost their own identity. They've lost that autonomy that makes them who they really are. Well, who they were, so to say. They cannot allow themselves to be who they are because it's perceived as danger. I'm not welcome as I am. It's undesirable to be who I am. And so I literally lost myself. I became the classic people pleaser. When I remember this episode when I was at school, I was either 7 or 8, I can't exactly remember. But one of the children that was always basically picking on me every day. And I was dreading by then to go to school. One day he called me in the school courtyard at the end of our morning classes. So it was lunchtime. It was time for us to go home. But he called me to the side and I remember it was a clear, sunny day. And he said, Ellie, come here. I have something to show you. And I thought, wow, this guy's being so nice to me. Well, I'm going to go, right? Because again, the people pleaser in me had officially taken over my identity. And also I thought, wow, maybe there's been a shift here. So I went over and I could see he had these hands clasped together. And I thought, wow, what is he going to show me that he's holding, concealing in his hands? And so I went there. He put his hands close to my face. When he opened them, a firework exploded in my face.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I, me being me at that point, because I had become an introvert fully. I would hardly utter a single word in class. Or if anything, I would try to say what everyone else would say. I was really at a loss for words. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. What am I going to do? So I tried to compose myself. And I remember going home, not saying a word. But my mom and dad looked at me like, what happened to you? But I just dismissed it as nothing really relevant. And this went on. And this kept going on. And because I was not really the fastest person to kind of pick up on subjects like mathematics or geometry or geography, I was very good with literature and languages, but I was not very good with the more analytical subjects, so to say. And many of the students in my class were. Then them picking on me went on. It kept going on. And every time I was marked down by the teacher because I wasn't just good at picking up on things. And, I hadn't discovered a methodology to be more efficient in mathematics and geography. And I didn't know that there was a way for me to actually learn at a much faster pace. Then that kind of bullying went on. And the problem with bullying, as I discovered later, is that it's not that you have to have a massive amount of bullies around you. It only takes one. And everyone else either chiming in or just completely moving away from you. You have no one to defend you. And that is the number one problem.
How old were you when that firecracker went off?
I think I was 7 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably 8, but not older than 8 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was still
And
in
you said,
primary school.
yeah. And you said earlier, you're kind of when kids would pick on you, you would kind of just take it all in, like not say anything back, just take it all in. And then you mentioned that you became introvert. So did not sticking up for yourself kind of change you from an extrovert to an introvert, and it kind of put a target on your back growing up, since you wouldn't do anything about kids can pick on you and they know you aren't going to do anything?
Yeah. And it's not just that it turned me into an introvert, because to me, speaking up meant equaled saying how you feel, express how you feel, express your emotions. And for me, that wasn't an option. So the only thing I could do was stay completely quiet. But then as I grew up, and obviously I became a teenager, so I went into high school and then university, and then finally working in the corporate world, I thought, hold on a minute, how am I going to balance the introvert aspect of me, of not saying anything, of staying quiet? How can I go for a job interview? How can I give an exam in high school or at university? I've got to be able to speak up. So the other distortion that helped me resolve, so to say, in inverted commas, the side of me that had been silenced for so long, was to mimic behaviors, become
Okay.
very
Before you get into
observant.
that, though, how did you discover that you're now introverted and that you needed to make this change?
Well, it was easy. I wasn't calling myself an introvert, but everybody else was
Okay.
telling me that. You're very shy. You're
Okay.
very timid.
I see.
Oh, you don't utter a single word. Oh, she's always hiding in a corner. And so I was terrified of being labeled that way. And as I grew up, as I went on to become a teenager, everybody was saying to me, oh, you hardly have any friends. You have 1 or 2 people. Look at such and such and such person. They have so many friends everywhere. And so it wasn't that I was calling myself an introvert. It was that everybody else was beginning to noticing the pattern, noticing the behavior, noticing my demeanor and my inability to really connect with people, to feel okay, because I became so socially anxious. I'm sure you've heard of this term, social anxiety, which is, you know, it's a very complex way of saying you're not comfortable around others. You cannot be yourself. It doesn't feel safe to be yourself around others. And so, again, I was being slapped all these labels. And there was obviously the little rebel inside of me saying, I hate to be called this and that. I am tired, but I still didn't know what to do about it. So that's why I went to this people pleasing, but also this behavior modification, mimicking other people's behaviors as a way to cover up the fact that I couldn't be myself and the fact that I was really socially awkward and anxious. And so I became a 24/7 observer of how people would interact in social settings, how people will behave. And I went on becoming the best actress, mimicking other people's behaviors,
Yeah. Did that
which
ever
meant
backfire on you at all?
totally hundreds of times. But again, for me, it just meant studying more. Go home, repeat, and add a little ingredient. See what they said, see what the other one retorted, what was their comeback, and repeat again the next day. So it became
Okay.
a full-time exercise. Can you imagine how much energy went into that? I was exhausted. When I look back in my 20s and 30s now, I think, my God, how come you were never exhausted? Because I was up sometimes rehearsing until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then the next day, I'd have to back at work. So that's what it did to me. Again,
Yeah.
because it goes back to it's not safe to be yourself. And so it backfired many times. It backfired with, boyfriends, because obviously the question I was being asked was, well, why can't you just tell me what you think? No, 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 no. I can't tell you what I think. It didn't go like this in my head. But it went on something like, oh, okay, what is it that I can say that perhaps would appease these people? And so I would say something, but not really what was in my heart. It went on in the corporate world.
Yeah.
In the corporate world, everybody saw it because I was around a lot of lawyers and a lot of salespeople. And lawyers and salespeople are good at one thing. They spot immediately the
Yeah. They
person.
can see it right through you. They can see it right through you. Yeah.
Absolutely. They could read me like an open book. No matter what I tried, no matter what disguises I wore, no matter what masks I painted on my face, no matter how much expensive makeup I'll put on myself every day, they'll read me like an open book. And so the comment that I will get from them hundreds of times, every time I would say something about a deal that we had on the table with a client is, well, just say what you think. Just tell them your point of view. Oh God, panic. And so again, I'll go back to rehearsing and thinking, okay, what is it that they will say? So I'd listen to their conversations. I'll watch them carefully and I'll think, okay, yeah, I'm going to borrow from their book, and then put this back in conversation with them. So it was exhaustion
So
24/7.
when people asked you what do you think, was there times you just straight up and lied to them just so you could make them happy, even though it was probably a stupid idea or whatever it was horrible, don't do it, but you just say, yeah, looks good.
Exactly. Or I'm fine. The classic thing, yeah, no, it's fine with me. No, it wasn't fine. I hated it. But
Yeah,
I was afraid that either it will come across as I'm fine or I hate it, which again went back to this is not the right way to express it because you come across as aggressive. And the problem with doing this is that I became a passive aggressive person. I'm sure you've heard of passive aggressive, right?
yep,
It's the pressure cooker effect. It became a pressure cooker. When you hold it all in, when you don't know how to express it because no one taught you and you never allowed yourself to express how you feel, forget it. You can't express it with other people. And so at some point, the pain and the weight of holding it all in, it has to come out. You need an outlet for that frustration. You need an outlet for that resentment. You need an outlet for that anger, which says, this is me for goodness sake. Take me as I am. I'm tired of being someone else. And so sometimes it came out with these prickly remarks, with these snide remarks. And some people noticed that. And they were saying to me, hold your opinions for yourself. What is wrong with you? If you're not happy, deal with your unhappiness, but don't come in being so prickly with me. Because
yeah.
again, people were very honest and I couldn't be honest with myself, let alone being honest with others. And so every kind of relationship that I had was an extremely tense relationship, smiling when I didn't want to. Do you know the number of people in my 20s and 30s that kept saying to me, oh, I'm amazed at you. You always seem to be happy. You're always smiling. You don't seem to have a care in the world. No, I did. But I never allowed myself to tap into it because it was
Yep.
too dangerous. My nervous system just wouldn't allow it. It wasn't safe for me. And also, they were seeing through this filter that I put in front of myself and in front of them. They didn't know what it was, but they knew that something was out of place because how can you have someone that is constantly happy 24/7? But my conversations and my interactions were very shallow because we'll talk about the weather, we'll talk about what we'd done when we met this person and that person, when we went out over the weekend, but it was never really deep connections, which is
Yeah.
what you do when you open yourself up and you bond with someone, right? Because we don't bond at the shallow level of what movies we watch. Yeah, that's important too. But we really bond when we open up and we allow ourselves to express our vulnerabilities. And so my interactions were very shallow. My friendship were very superficial.
So the way you're acting in your adulthood, is this like contributing to your bullying you experienced at the workplace?
Yeah, very much so. Because the bullying in the workplace, it was a lot more sophisticated than the bullying that I had when I was a child. Because
Yeah,
children are
tell
very
us about
direct,
that.
right?
Yeah, tell
Children
us
are
about the
very raw.
sophistication. Yeah.
The sophistication came, and this is when I said, okay, Why is this happening to me? And that's when I started really feeling the pain. And that's when I said, enough is enough. Now, the corporate bullying, because I know that there are people that have been bullied openly, like being shouted at, my level of bullying, the ones that I suffered, was the covert, right? When you have people that are really narcissists, so it's all about them, and they'll do anything to put you down through constant gaslighting, bullying, and they do it in a way that you don't see it coming. And so I started realizing with this new management that had come on board that they were always criticizing my work, always something to pick on. And they could because they were senior management, right? So who am I to question them? And then they'll call me out in emails, copying God knows how many people in the organization, pointing fingers at me. And then I had to write so many emails or reports explaining myself. And guess what? It was never enough. When you're being called out, if you're being called out with, okay, here's what I would have expected you to do instead of you doing that. But when you have
Yeah.
comments like, okay, I'm reaching out for help because, I need to understand what the issue is. You should know your job. You should know it better than anybody else. You shouldn't be asking me these questions. And it just went on and on and on. So I started doubting myself, thinking, hold on a minute, I've been in this job, I've been in this company for 15 years, and all of a sudden I'm being told I don't know what I'm doing. And then, once or twice you think, oh, okay, all right, maybe I should pick myself up. I should have done things differently. So you start questioning because no one is giving you open feedback. It's all covert, you see. And so, but when this continues on and on and on and on and on, and then it becomes your quarterly or your 6-month appraisal, where you start asking for specific details. I shouldn't be telling you that. Well, hold on a minute, but what's going on here? So they literally ganged up on me. And I knew what they were trying to do, right? Because I was a high earner
Yeah.
in the organization. They were trying to get rid of me through performance, because that way they didn't have to pay me any exit package or none of the thing. So eventually I started to realize what he was doing, but it was already affecting my health because bullying does. Right? It's not about when people talk about bullying or gaslighting. Yes, okay, it's mental health because you start questioning yourself in so many different ways, but it's physical. I wasn't sleeping. I was not eating properly. I was questioning myself, not just at work, but in every relationship that I had around me. Or maybe I am as bad as they say. And so that's when I said, okay, hold on a minute. Nothing warrants me being so down on myself like this. What is going on? Is it me that I'm taking it too personally? Because again, the same comments that I had to bear for the past 30 years, they came back. You're a bit too sensitive. You're a bit too intense. You're taking things too personal, and so on and so forth. So again, they were telling me it was something to do with me. That I wasn't putting my business hat on, that I wasn't separating my emotions from the business deals that I had in front of me, from the way that I had to perform at work. So this was going on and on and on until I actually sat one evening and I actually said to myself, hold on a minute, is it really me? Or is it really them? Is it possible that perhaps there is something about them that they've decided up front that no matter what I do, is never going to be enough. And then I started sharing, because up until then, I never shared with anyone. And this is important because anyone that is bullied or gaslit, it's important to tap into someone like a confidant, someone that you trust, and say, okay, I'm feeling this way. Am I just, imagining things? Am I overreacting like they say that I am? Or is there something really legitimate happening here? That perhaps I'm not that overly sensitive, to what they're saying. And that's when I started speaking up and people said, well, girl, no, you're being bullied. You're being gaslit. And then I started sharing, obviously in confidence, the exchanges that I had through emails with these people. And they said, no, where are the facts? Where's the fact? What you need dates and times. And I recognized in myself that people pleasing attitude because I was still making excuses for them. I was making excuses for my senior management treating me that way. Well, perhaps he didn't mean that. He called me out because, girl, you need dates and times. You need facts. This is how it works. And so that's when I realized that it was a game that they were playing against me. They were trying to put me down. They were trying to weaken my already low confidence so that I will eventually fold and would say, well, actually, you're right. And I'm so super wrong. And it didn't work because I decided to stand up for myself.
What's that look like, standing up for yourself?
Well, standing up for yourself it takes courage. All right.
Yep.
It
What did
takes
you do, I
courage.
guess? Yeah.
So it small steps. Okay. Small steps. First of all, I started sharing, like I just mentioned. I started opening up to people. And people were saying, yeah, it's not that you're perfect. You don't have to be perfect. But at the same time, they have a point, but so do you. And what they're saying is just a lot of fluff unless they can give you the specific thing. So you need to have the courage to go back and ask them. And so I did. At the beginning, I was really frightened. It's not an easy thing to do because these people have the weight of the senior management on you, right? So they can bring a lot of people around you to intimidate you even more. But then I said, hold on. It's either I go back in the nook, I go back to my little den and be humiliated and being called out, or I'm going to break this cycle and I'm going to ask them questions that are going to be businesslike. And so I started looking at these questions and I started working with my friend. And I said, look, is this a male too emotional? And she said, no, this is exactly what I would ask. It's like cold-hearted, a business response back to say, thank you for your message, okay? Because you don't want to sound aggressive to these people, because they will try and call you out and say, you're being a bit too aggressive, you're being a bit too sensitive. So you don't want to give them any room. So what I did was, thank you very much for your feedback. I take it on board. Could you be so kind to give me the specific details so I could actually take action, appropriate action, and I could actually put remedy to it? And that's when the classic response started coming out. You shouldn't be asking me this question. You should know yourself. So at that point, I knew that I had them. I had the smoking gun, so to say. And so that's when I gradually started seeing the power of sharing and expressing and asking questions. And I do it all the time, because I've always been a very sensitive child, hypersensitive. And so, once you spend your whole life being told you're too emotional, you're too much, you're too sensitive, you need to calm down, you need to relax, or the classic gaslighting, when you get a little bit emotional, a bit feisty. Hey, are you okay? Hold on a minute. You can say anything you want to me, but I can't say anything to you back. So that's when I realized I was part of a game, a sick game. But I realized I had the power to express myself and I had the right to express myself. Obviously, I had to work on my power of self-expression, right? To make sure that it'll come out in a way that wouldn't come across as aggressive. But nonetheless, that's when I discovered the power to be me. And I thought, well, you know what? It's great to be me. And also, it's okay to express how I feel. It doesn't mean that people will run away because they think, oh my God, she's a monster. She's unlocked a monster. No, you can express your emotions. You can still be emotional and express those emotions and be okay with it, because that is the number one thing. Many people I discovered when I went through my emotional mastery training, many people are afraid of expressing the emotions. So that's when I started realizing that I was connected to the genuine aspect of me, to my genuine self, and beginning to express it. And I started looking at everybody around me, the people that just couldn't do it. And so the ability to express what I felt, to learn how to express it, became my superpower.
So how did your supervisors react the first time you stuck up to yourself, like stuck up for yourself, I meant?
They didn't like it. They didn't like it at all because they saw a new side of me. They looked at
Yeah.
me and they thought, what's going on here? So they gave me a very negative mark for my appraisal, right? Which meant, if you get so many over time, you potentially can get fired,
Yeah.
especially if you stand up for yourself. And so he went to HR.
When you did that, when you stood up for yourself, they didn't like it. Did that make you retreat a little bit back to your old habits? Or were you kind of expecting that and just kept pushing forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I kept pushing forward because by then, and this is the power of opening up and sharing your pain with others, is that some people, as usually when it happens with bullying, it only takes one. And then the other people to back them. And then everybody else around you, especially your peers, the people that you thought were your friends, to move away from you because they know something is wrong, but they're not supporting you. They're not standing up for you. So you feel like you're isolated, basically. Many people that are bullied feel this way. So I started sharing with some people inside of my organization and outside of my immediate organization. And the ones that actually realized what was going on, they either had an experience with either direct experience or knew that someone else had faced a similar situation, they all said to me, "You're being bullied." End of. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And the more I was sharing, the more I was talking to people who were coming to me with advice. Other senior managements from different parts of the organization, they were telling me how to respond, to formulate a response that sounded very businesslike, that expressed how I felt without coming across as aggressive or harsh, or unprofessional, right? And so they didn't like it. But I thought, I am pressing forward now. I'm not taking this line down because obviously the people that advised me, once I started opening up about the way I felt, they said, you've got two choices. Either you keep taking it like a punch bag and you know where that's going to take you because you're going to get fired, or you're going to go to HR and report it. But believe me, if you do that, you're going to war. But the choice is yours. Again, one would say, well, definitely go to that choice. I know some people, and I spoke to people that had left the organization because they had been severely bullied. They just couldn't take it. So we always have a choice. And they said, yes, I could have stood up for myself. But to be honest, I got to a point, and this is one lady I spoke to at that time. She said to me, I got to the point where I was questioning the way I was putting my shoes on. And that's when my husband said to me, just leave. We'll sort out the why, the what, and our future together later. But I don't want to see you like this. So there's always a choice. But me
Mhm.
being me, I thought, no offense. I haven't been, doing martial arts for years, becoming a black belt. I haven't moved to a foreign country and lived in a foreign country, including America, by the way, and lived in a foreign culture and basically lived an entire life for myself, being independent, to be put down like this. That was my choice. And also I knew that there was this cycle, and I felt that somehow I was almost attracting these people. And I said, why does this happen to me all the time? Why does this keep happening? I have enough. And so my spirit said, no, you need to do something about it. So I took not one, not two, I took 3 senior management people to HR. And then I remember, when I actually put that document forward to HR, I said, prepare yourself. You're going to war.
Yeah.
And it went on for about 4, almost 5 months, back and forth with HR. Obviously meetings as well, because you had to go to a meeting, everything is recorded, and eventually it was victory time. When she called me in the room 4 months later, she said, your appeal has been upheld because you're right. And then she told me that how she started interviewing the people that I'd spoken to, the people that had helped me, to put together my report, to put together my emails to the senior management in response to their bullying attacks, how they stood up for me as my witnesses, and how eventually more people started coming forward anonymously to speak against me, to speak against them and to speak in my favor. And so it was tough, right? It was tough. But I remember when I got that result, I was the happiest person on the planet. I knew that I had reached a milestone in my life when I said, okay, this is when I say enough is enough. And from that moment on, I started standing up for myself to the point that now when I see someone gaslighting me, not that it happens every day, but occasionally you have this along your path. When I see that someone is gaslighting me or trying to bully me, I just see them miles away already. I know exactly the energy. I know exactly the words that they're using. And I think, okay, I know what you're trying to do. And so either I walk away, and if I haven't got the choice to walk away, now I know what to do with them.
So, did you end up staying with that company
I
afterwards,
did.
after you won? Okay.
Absolutely. Because what happened as a result of what I did, it changed the organization completely. Someone that I knew from the senior management became the head of the organization. And he said to me very quietly, he said, I know exactly what's been happening. And I know it's very much in character with these people, and it's out of character for you to do something like this. I know that you want to leave because I already asked HR and I said, give me a package, I'm leaving. Give me a year, give me 2 years, I don't care. I'm done. I just want a clean slate. I just want to leave, try something different. But he called me up and said, no, I'm rebuilding the organization from the ground up. I want you to stay because I need you to be here. And after that, we were like a family. We were
Awesome.
supporting each other. We were working with clients, around the clock deals. It was great.
Sticking up for yourself, especially in the corporate world, has got to be probably a really hard thing to do because it can go very wrong very fast and you could be out the door. But what is your advice for people who could be experiencing this right now? And how can they get the courage to stand up for themselves?
Look, the number one thing that you need to do is, you need to stop being quiet. Reach out. Okay. You need to reach out. First and foremost, if you have a partner, if you have a friend, you need to express how you feel. Even if you're in doubt and you think, well, maybe I'm just imagining things, maybe they're right, but you need to open up because when you start sharing how you feel, someone is bound to give you some feedback. Someone is bound to tell you, okay, I don't think this is right. Do you know the number of people that come to me now that they know my background? The number of people that come to me and say, can we have a consultation with you? Because I really want to check if it's just me that I'm being overly sensitive or actually if I'm being bullied or gaslit. And I immediately I spot the signs right away.
Yeah.
And most times I just tell them, I say, yeah, okay, you're a very sensitive person in a good way, but you're no go or you're not imagining things. And so it share it. Okay. Speak to a confidant, someone that you know has your back, and open up and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Can I run this past you? And then don't be afraid to speak to someone at work because we all have our work confidant, someone that we can open up to, someone that we have a cup of coffee with, you know, open up and share. Don't be afraid because the choice is to go back in the shell, hold it all in, and you know where that's going to lead you. Sleepless nights. It's going to affect your relationship with your wife, with your children. You're bringing all of that baggage, all of that fatigue, all of that stress into your private life. Is that really what you want? You can't afford to stay silent. And regardless of the outcome, whether you think, you know what, this is too much, I'm just going to resign. I'm going to hand in my notice. That's fine. No one is going to think any less of you. But your mental and physical well being is too important. So don't stay silent. Because if you stay silent, there's probably something there that from years ago in your life that told you it's safe to be silent. And at this point, it's not going to help you.
Yep. And for you, you were told that at 4 years old.
Very much so. Very much. I knew that there was this pressure cooker inside of me that said, hold on a minute. Because also in the corporate world, when you are with children, you go home. And eventually, you go to higher school or you leave school. So eventually the bullies are going to go away. In the corporate world, you're getting paid. You've got bills to pay. You got kids to send to school, to feed. The stakes are way higher.
Yep. Not only that, if you want to get a new job, those supervisors need to give you the reference. It's hard. It's tough. Yeah. Ellie, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your story with us. If people want to follow you, get a hold of you, how can they do that? Perfect. And for those people who are listening, you'll find all of her links in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, you saw it go across your screen. Ellie, again, thank you so much for coming on today. Have a good day. If this episode helped you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And to learn more about our nonprofit, Karate Chop Bullying, and the anti-bullying and confidence-building programs we offer youth, visit karatechopbullying.org. For podcast episodes and updates, go to breakingbullying.com or email us at any time at breakbullyinghere@gmail.com. I'm Tim Flynn. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time as we keep breaking the silence on bullying.